Good evening. I call to order the May meeting of the Public Works Committee. Due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, a roll call will be conducted. A committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their votes. Committee members are Vice Chair, Councilmember Barbara Haynes Burke, Councilmember John Larson, and Councilmember Annette Scipio. With any luck, this will be our next to last remote meeting, so hopefully we'll be getting together soon. And I want to welcome you all to tonight's action. As we usually do, we have items on our consent agenda and items on our general agenda. And I would ask the committee or others participating if there's anything on the consent agenda they would like to be pulled. Can I have pulled?
Chairman, C2.
C2. Any others? Okay, if not, could I get a motion to approve the balance?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the balance.
Second.
And motion has been moved and seconded. If the clerk could call the roll.
Councilmember Burke.
Yes.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, clerk, if you could read item C2.
Item C2, resolution fixing date for public hearing on a petition to close and abandon a portion of Park Avenue and notice to all persons interested in the closing thereof located in South Ward. Petition of Salem congregation.
Mr. Duquesne, are you fielding this one?
Yes, sir. Relatively straightforward item. This is a request to close a portion of Park Avenue requested by Salem congregation that is generally located at the intersection of Cemetery Street and Salem Avenue. In your packet is an aerial photograph of where the closure is proposed, and it generally sits up next to Salem Cemetery.
Sorry, Mr. Larson, I jumped the gun there. Did you have a specific question about this? Or
No, that was a nice summary. If you could pull that drawing back up again, Meredith. I think that why I pulled this was I think it has an important sort of historical context to it. If you see where it goes, if the lower left section is the second Negro or African-American cemetery that Moravian set up in 1856. And actually the whole square there was part of that cemetery. In about 1920 something, 23, Park Avenue went in and bifurcated that cemetery. And what the Salem congregation is doing right now, Salem Congregation United Brethren Church is doing, is trying to basically redeem that cemetery. They've done a lot of ground penetrating radar. They've relocated a number of graves. They've marked the graves, and they're trying now to basically clean up the land around the cemetery. I think it's a very noble project. When I was at Old Salem, it was a subject of some discussion and concern about the condition of that cemetery. They put up a new fence around it and protected it. And this is part of that effort, basically, to reclaim it. So I applaud the effort and will certainly support it. It's in the South Ward.
I'd entertain a motion.
So move approval.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Burke.
Yes.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
And Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, that takes care of our consent agenda. Let's move on to the general agenda. First item, G1.
Item G1, shared micromobility electric scooter update.
Mr. Duquesne, I know this is one of your favorites. Let's go to you on this.
I apologize. I didn't give a greetings and salutations on the last item. So good evening, Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the council. My name is Damon Duquesne, Assistant City Manager. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Matthew Burchick, who will provide you some information on a pilot program that we have recently undertaken regarding the shared micromobility form of electric scooters. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Burchick.
All right. Thank you, Damon. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members and council members. Matthew Burchick, I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator with the City DOT. So as Damon mentioned, at the beginning of March, staff was asked to essentially pilot the suspension of the nightly collection requirement for electric scooters. If you remember back to the time when we were drafting that ordinance, that was one of the requirements that we put in the ordinance at that time. And I think it was, there were some issues that the micromobility companies had with that requirement, and they had brought that to the city a couple times, and we got to the point where we were willing to pilot the suspension of that requirement to see how it would work. So beginning March 12th, we actually suspended that requirement, coordinated with the companies to notify them and to ensure that, as a result of that suspension of that requirement, that we weren't having any negative consequences to that. So we worked with them to ensure that they would continue their daily sweeps and increase the frequency of those sweeps to ensure that scooters weren't parked illegally. So that's been going on since March 12th. And while we've eliminated the requirement for that nightly collection, the operation hours have remained in effect. So using the GPS technology and that the companies have with those scooters, we are able to disable each of the devices at 9 p.m. and then re-enable them at 6 a.m. So we still have the same operating hours. We're just not requiring the companies to pick up the devices each evening. We haven't had any reported complaints related to the suspension of that nightly collection requirement. We've notified the companies of some parking issues, and I know other residents and visitors have also notified the companies of some issues, but those have been relatively minor and probably aren't related to the nightly collection as far as we can tell. I think most of the complaints that we have received since this spring, since more scooters have been within the public right-of-way, is related to people riding on sidewalks. So we have been working with the companies and doing some work on our own to try to proactively eliminate that issue. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about, one, the suspension of the nightly collection requirement, and two, any of the efforts we're making and working with the companies to provide education and some enforcement activities.
Matthew, were you going to go through the exhibits in the packet?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
I mean, I just wanted to point out on Exhibit B, I was really surprised and pleased to see the extent to which they're being used. I didn't expect to see them used over such a geography.
Sure. So the chart on the screen right now is Exhibit A, and that just shows the number of rides and the average number of trips per day, and some of the other information that we receive from the companies dating back to January. And you can see, not surprisingly, with each month as the weather conditions improve, there's more ridership, and we can provide these reports on a monthly basis so you can see how these numbers are changing.
Great.
And then the next one, this was Exhibit B. One of the tools that we use to track the number of scooters that are out there and how they're being used allows us to see where these rides are taking place. So you can see 4th Street, 5th Street, Liberty, and Trade. Those are kind of the prime locations for ridership, and then it kind of radiates from that point out. Kind of the density of rides, surrounding decreases as you move away from the center of downtown.
Matthew, can I comment on that drawing for just a minute?
Yes, sir.
For us that are color-coded challenged, could you differentiate a little bit more between the various browns and oranges and reds? I mean, if you look at the bar graph, the yellow's clear and the red's pretty clear, but then you get everything in between.
Right.
I'm having a hard time understanding. Can you use a green or a blue or something else that would help us sort of understand that chart a little bit better? If we're going to use it again, if we're not going to use it, then don't worry about it. But if it's going to be a reference map, I think it's very useful. I really appreciate seeing it. I'm astonished at how far afield these things are going.
Right.
outside of the core city core.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to bring this back, provide this on a monthly basis, and we can certainly change the color coding on there.
Thank you very much.
Matthew, I do have a question about that same map also. I think it's good to see that people are going outside of downtown. It looks like the Northeast Ward going up Cleveland Avenue is getting a lot of utility up in that area. And I was seeing how far east it's going on. Also, I think that's it says that there's a need for them for the population that seems to have less access to vehicles, personal vehicles. I don't know. Yellow is not the large ridership, but at least it is a ridership. And that is important to note. I have had complaints. I haven't reported them, but I sometimes you just wait. But the complaint was really downtown Trade Street, where the bikes are being left on the sidewalks, blocking the walkways, the sidewalks, and people's ability to move up and down Trade Street, particularly if they're in a wheelchair. So I think we still have to think about not moving them at night, because they're just left on the sidewalks. And if they're just turned off, then they're left wherever they are. And they're being left on those sidewalks. And I think that's an access issue that we'll have to continue to look at.
Certainly, yeah, we can certainly work with the companies on that.
Councilmember Scipio, I view that as sort of a process of education. Citizens have to tell us when they see them out of place. We need to turn around and tell the operators, the company operators. We have to educate them, and then it's really their responsibility to educate their clients, the people who are actually using them. So I know when I've gotten calls about riders on the sidewalk, and I turn right around and report those things to staff, and they get them over to the company, and they do take action on them. So it's not like a blank wall that we're talking to. So I would encourage everybody to call in if you see those issues, and let's address them. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Matthew, what does the ridership look like in the North Ward now that we have scooters over here near the college, the university?
Doesn't look like much.
So, yes, ma'am. So the data that's shown here, we need a certain number of rides. The way the software that we use works, there are a lot of privacy kind of checks within the scooters themselves and how the companies process that information. So in order for us to show any kind of pattern on this map, there needs to be a certain number of rides that needs to meet a certain threshold of rides per day before it'll actually show. And part of that is a privacy issue, that if there were so few rides that you could potentially match the rider to that ride. So we need a few more rides. So at this point, there hasn't been a whole lot of ridership in that area. But I expect, as weather's continue to improve, and this map says through April 14th, so we have a whole month of data that we don't have access to yet. But I would expect, that we would see, on the next report, the next map, we would see additional activity probably in multiple places throughout the community that just didn't show up on this map.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, if I could follow up a little bit on that. I think one of the questions that's sort of hovering out there is, are we still nesting these things? Or how is the initial distribution or placement of these units being determined at this point? Is that part of the contract with the providers?
You're correct. So one of the requirements that we have is that they coordinate with staff on identifying their deployment locations.
Right.
So that's something that we review. We review each of the deployment locations and essentially verify that they're not going to be issues with where they're intending to deploy them. So that's still part of the process we go through with these companies.
I think one of the things when they were being brought in at night and then being redistributed the next morning, the nesting process was very clear as to where they were launched from. And I think, we could certainly look at that. But I think what we're going to be beginning to see is maybe distribution in some of these more remote areas might be more appropriate, particularly as a transportation alternative, which it looks like it may be becoming. And I think it's very exciting to see, how widespread, how far they're carrying these things. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, you sort of go where the audience is, and we may want to put some satellite locations out there. But I am a little concerned that if we're not requiring them to come back in at night, I don't know how the control of these units is sort of being anchored in the launch locations of these things. They just sort of end up scattered all throughout the city. And I've seen several in very remote locations just laying in the sidewalk, where I assume somebody comes and picks them up eventually. I don't know how that's being handled.
That's right. So they do, the companies, they do these sweeps on a daily basis. And part of, it's to their benefit to have the scooters in locations where they're likely to be rented. So if there are some in remote locations like that, chances are that the companies are either going to pick them up or they're going to receive a complaint about them and they'll be retrieved that way.
Do the units have a phone number on them or something for calling in the complaint?
They do, yeah. They should have identification of, obviously the company, but then contact information and identification number as well, so that the person can report that specific unit.
Okay. Obviously, I have not reported any of them.
You should. You should.
I should.
Matthew, want to move on to Exhibit C, please?
Okay. So I had mentioned some of the education efforts and in trying to be proactive about some of these issues, and the companies have, they've responded. They're providing hang tags on scooters, reminding users of the rules, and one of the companies has actually provided some A-frame signs that they can move to different locations around downtown to remind riders that they're not supposed to be riding on the sidewalks. The city clearly has a role in this as well. So this was one graphic that we created with the marketing and communications department to help remind people, riders of their responsibilities and not riding on the sidewalks. So this was a mock-up that we had created with marketing as one potential option of that education and making sure that message is clear to everyone. We did some research, and this is a technique that other communities have used, essentially installing these at curb ramps or on sidewalks downtown, again as a reminder for riders. And probably the most successful and most targeted effort we've seen is to actually create these using a vinyl material that can be installed for 4 to 6 months during the peak riding season, and then can be removed, so it's not a permanent marker on the ground. So this was one concept we wanted to share as a potential education tool. Great.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. This is an information item. These scooters will continue to be somewhat, they'll generate some friction, but I think on balance, the fact that people are able to access downtown from distances without having to get in a car or an Uber, I think on balance is good. Anytime we can eliminate a car trip in and around our community, I think we're better off. So thank you for that information, Matthew. And can we turn to item G2?
Item G2, Winston-Salem Transit Authority Services Update.
Mr. Duquesne, I've got you labeled as the person to go to on this, although I think you'll probably hand it off.
Yes, sir. I'll pass the baton rapidly. Good evening again, Chairman, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee and council. As always, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our WISTA General Manager, Ms. Donna Woodson, and she'll provide us with the most recent update.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Woodson.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. It is my pleasure to be before you tonight to present to you the most current WISTA update. Thank you, Meredith. So we'll start on the next slide, please. What you have before you this evening is a comparison of the COVID ridership impact for the fixed route as well as the TransAid modes of transportation. And as you can see, there's the outlook from March of 2020 to March of 2021. And in the red, it indicates the variance for the physical year change, whether it was all were negative. Of course, we lost ridership when we compare the previous year to our current year. And the highest, as you see, was in April. April was the month that was the most challenging for us as far as ridership is concerned. So for fixed route, we lost about 41% of our ridership in the month of April. And it was the same it was consistent with TransAid as well, and with a higher decrease in our service ridership, which was about 46%. To date, we are recovering. As you can see, we're now in a positive for fixed route. In the month of March, we were up about 15%. And then for March of 2021, we were up about 23% for the TransAid department. So this just gives you a summary of the year-to-date changes and variances, the ridership as it relates to COVID, pre-COVID, and during the COVID season.
Woodson, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What do you think is behind the numbers in January and February of this year? Down 38 and 42%, if I'm reading that right.
Yes, it's just 38% variance for January for fixed route. And then, of course, TransAid was 42%. The weather, I think that played a factor in it as well. I think after January 4th, we started increasing we started charging fares again. So I think that helped with the reduction in services, because when we started the fare-free service, the ridership increased at that time. And once January 4th hit and we went back to charging fares, we did see a variance in the ridership.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on this slide? Okay, next slide, please, Meredith. So this is the regional ridership comparison, and this just compares all of the triad part, Burlington, High Point, GTA, and Worcester as far as our ridership, and is labeled by the different major changes affected when the governor enforced the different changes in the phases. So we wanted to show this. This is something we share with our board on a monthly basis, and I wanted to present this to you all this evening so that you can kind of see on a color-coded scale the variance of ridership in the triad. But this is presented by part in our monthly meetings as well. Next slide, please. I wanted to also provide you with an update on the grant status for the 5307 CARES Act. This slide just basically shows and identifies the amount of funding. We know that we received that $12,389,000 in 2020 for the 5307 grants to assist with our lost revenues, PPE, and different things that we need to provide financial assistance for transportation all over. So this gives you a breakdown of the amount that was awarded and how much has been spent, the remaining balances, and a list of the drawdowns to be drawn down. We did just have the third quarter drawdown, and right now the percentage of funds spent overall is about 45.95%, which is about half of that $12 million. However, when you see the remaining balance of the $609 million left, I want to remind you that of that, $6.4 million was allocated for the buses, the 8 new buses, fixed route buses that we're having built. And as we speak, my assistant general manager and maintenance director, he's actually in Anderson, Alabama, doing the bus inspections. So the buses are ready to roll. He's expecting that first one to make sure he doesn't identify any issues or concerns, safety or any operational concerns with that first bus that just come offline. And he'll be back on Thursday to report. And if everything is all is well, then we'll have a new fleet of 8 New Flyer buses on out to replace our 8 aging buses in the fall. So we're proud and happy about that. So when that happens, you'll see the blue and white buses off the street, and we'll have all green buses to operate throughout the city.
Will the new buses be the same as the hybrid buses that were the
Yes,
green
sir.
buses that run around now? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this? Okay. Next slide, please, Mary. Just wanted to briefly update you on the ARPA funds. Of course, that is the third round of COVID funds that will be made available to public transportation. And we don't have a lot to report on right now. We're still waiting for guidance from the U.S. Treasury on the allowable expenses, the things that we can utilize the funds for. As we receive information, we'll provide you with an update. But we do know that the FTA announced that the MPO will receive $269,000 million. And that will be to the MPO, which will be split between the Winston-Salem Transit Authority part and Davidson County. Once we identify the split and the allowable expenses, we will report back to the board for your direction. Next slide. So the vaccine transportation, anyone that wants to and needs to be vaccinated can ride Worcester for free. I'm sure and hopefully you all have heard the advertisement via radio. We did television ads. We've run all type of newspaper, we had the website, all type of advertising, making sure that everyone in Forsyth County knows that they can. We don't want transportation to be a barrier for anyone that needs to be vaccinated because we want Forsyth County safe. So Worcester is trying in every effort to advertise that and make sure that everyone knows that by any means you can call in our vaccine transportation line to schedule a trip. We are making modifications to our process because now they're accepting walk-ins. So if they call in the same day, we have things in place, processes in place to make sure that they get to the vaccine locations. So that we're allocated $57,000 to help us towards that from the state, and we're utilizing those funds on a weekly basis. I have to report to the state the transportation that we provided for the week from Saturday to Friday. And then we, have a monthly process for invoice and all of that, but we're in compliance with what the state is requiring, and we're operating that every day. We have people Monday through Sunday that are going to the vaccine locations. To date, we've actually transported a little over 1,000 citizens to the vaccine locations. Some weeks are greater than others, but we want to make sure we continue to advertise and make it available to anyone that uses it or needs it.
Excellent.
Thank you. So now this slide depicts the Worcester Bus Stop. And I wanted to make sure that the public, you all were aware of the process. Years ago, you could catch a ride by a criteria. And the criteria basically was when you were a citizen and you were at a intersection, if the Worcester bus was traveling and making a left turn and you were right there on the right-hand side of the street. So a lot of different things. It was kind of mimicking a flag stop, which was, the way public transportation operated back in the day. When the Worcester made the route changes in 2017, that criteria was to go away. But over a period of time, through various meetings and just riding routes and different things, we've observed that some people were still honoring and utilizing the criteria, which is a safety concern for Worcester for various reasons. One, and then for training, when you hire new employees, it's hard to train on stopping at a criteria versus a bus stop. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that in order to access Worcester, you have to be at a bus stop, a shelter, identified location that it has a bus stop sign, I'm sorry. So in an effort to make sure that we create a more safer transportation, we advertised this to the public, and as of yesterday, May 10th, that was implemented. So all the Worcester bus drivers know that we're honoring bus stops only. Prior to doing that, for the last year, we've been installing additional bus stops just to make sure that we don't make anything, cause any barriers for our existing riders. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at additional requests by passengers from our drivers who are the front line so that we can create a route that is feasible for our riders. So that took place on yesterday, and we actually had a few concerns and requests for additional stops. And just as late as Friday of last week, we installed 5 additional bus stops at the request of the area of the Academy and Granville, because we have a senior citizen home. And of course, we don't want to negatively impact any of our citizens, but we want to be safe. And that's our main goal, safety first. And of course, customer service is just as important. But this took place on yesterday. I'll entertain any questions on that.
Ms. Woodson, I do have a question on that. I have been a former bus rider for a while, and so I hope customer service is more important than stopping at the bus stop, because there are people who can't get to the route by the time the bus get there, even though they're en route. So if I'm walking down the sidewalk going to the stop, can I flag the bus down so they wait for me at the stop when I get there? Or are they just going to just keep going because I'm not at the stop?
No, ma'am. Even before we made this change or correction on yesterday, the operators are trained. If we see someone trying to get to a bus stop, to stop and put your flashes on and wait for them to get there. Now, we do try to adhere to our on-time performance, but customer service is more important than on-time performance, of course. So whenever possible and it's safe to do so, they are to stop at a bus stop and give that passenger time to get there in a reasonable time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very fair, because you got to balance safety with customer service, and
yes.
And our routes aren't that frequent. So usually it's 30 minutes to an hour. So if I miss it, I've got to wait an hour.
Yes,
that's not very comfortable. May not be a whole lot of people that we're servicing, but if we can give top-notch service to everybody who rides our buses, I think we've done an excellent job in that, as opposed to just trying to get a performance on time and miss half the people.
Correct. I totally agree with you. Safety, like I said, safety always first, but customer service is equally as important. Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you. Question, I'm just looking at the website on my phone. So I'm glad to see that it's easy to read on a mobile device, but do we not have an option in Spanish?
I'm sorry, you faded out, Councilmember Mundy. Could you repeat that, please?
I'm asking if we have an option in Spanish for our website that provides information to Spanish.
In Spanish. We do have we have our schedules and a lot of our memos, but our website is not in Spanish.
I'd strongly recommend that we do that. I don't think it's a tremendous expense. As a matter of fact, I think it's a minimal expense. And a lot of websites, you basically just hit the button to ask it to translate into Spanish. I'm sure there's some setup charges, but that could be beneficial to an entire group of people who either don't speak English or English is not their first language and they struggle with it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will definitely look into that and report back to you as soon as possible on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you. And Ms. Woodson, you and your staff, thank you for everything you've done during this tumultuous year. I heard you say that you made some adjustments to the routes for senior citizens. I think you said, did you say you made 5 adjustments?
5 additional bus stops. 2 of these bus stops that were installed were at the Academy and Granville, I think it's Granville area, right there where the senior citizen home is. There was not a bus stop inbound. There was one inbound, but not outbound. So there were 2 bus stops that were placed there, and there were a couple other stops that were put up because passengers called or a driver called and noted that there was an area of concern that would cause some senior citizens to have to walk a greater distance. And one was down a hill, and we definitely didn't want, that's a safety issue in itself. So my operations manager, Mr. Crawford, went out on Thursday and Friday, and put those additional bus stops up there with signs so that the seniors and any other passengers that needed to access the bus on those areas were able to do so.
Okay. So if a citizen calls in or calls their council member and says, you know, I need a bus stop. I know my sister or somebody got one over there. Why can't I have one over here? How do we handle that?
We handle it on case-by-case situation. We are in the process of creating a standard because that can really get out of hand, and it has.
That's where I'm going with this.
Yes, it can get out of hand. So what we do a lot of running around, to be quite honest. So every time we get a request, whether it's through a council member or a citizen or an operator employee, the safety department and the operations department, they go out, and DOT, they go out and look at the area and observe it to make sure if it's a shelter, of course, right away, and all those restrictions. Then we look at the safety of that location and make sure that it's somewhere that we feel we can put a stop, and then look at if it makes sense to put a stop there, a bus stop or a shelter. So there's certain factors that we do in a process of approving it, but we need a standard because this has gotten to a point where we need something in place, and we're working on that.
And I think if you don't, you're going to go back to where it used to be. You'll be like school buses, stop every 5 or 6 houses and pick somebody up coming out of the house. Another thing that I am concerned about, and maybe you're working on it, when do we get the signs painted or new signs? That green, I love it, but that green has not held up well under the weather conditions. And for me personally, I don't think it represents the great Worcester Association that we have. So I would beg you and your staff, you figure out what needs to happen, because the signs look tired and beat up, and you know, you can't hardly read them, okay?
Right, and I will tell you right quick, a little funny thing about that. We were looking at our communication was, in the beginning was the green stops only, going to green stops only. Well, we quickly identified that stops are not all green. Some of the green has faded to blue. So
correct.
We had to remove the green stops only and put Worcester Bus Stops only, because we do know Worcester there, but we can't promise you that it's going to be a green sign. So we are working on that too. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And to follow that up, didn't we have a deal with the bus company that we would keep the buses green for some set period of time?
No.
After that, we could change the color of them? There's
no deal. We can change it anytime we get ready to. As long as we
Good.
have the funding, we can do it.
Good. Happy to hear that.
Okay.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes, ma'am.
I liked one of your charts. If you could go back to the regional one that showed ridership, across that one. It looks like Park has done a phenomenal job. Well, one of it could have been that you said this graph is from them. So are they tooting their own horn? And did they fudge the numbers to make themselves look really good? But it looks like they were phenomenal, as well as GTA. Was there something they were doing that we were not doing? Was there some resources they had that we did not have that allowed them to look so very good? I think if I drew the line from their peaks they stayed very consistent where the hours, which are blue, we've gone up and down a lot and a lot down. And I wondered, do you know what they were doing that increased their ridership? Did they offer some programs? And it doesn't have to be today. You can sort of investigate that to see what did they do that made them stay fairly strong in their ridership, more so than ours.
Well, I will confirm, but I'm almost 100% sure this is actually the opposite. So where you see it, this is the ridership that they lost. So we actually lost less ridership than PART and GTA. They lost more than we did. So.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking at that all wrong. They're going below. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. They're below. Right.
I can confirm that as I sit on the PART board.
That above the chart,
Okay.
That's where Worcester actually, our ridership grew and the other systems did not. So we were
Okay, I see that now. Thank you for correcting me. I was reading that graph all wrong.
That's okay. No problem at all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Council members, the chair would like to ask a favor here. I can't see you. And so if you would, when you have a question, if you could ask staff, let them know that you want to speak. It just makes it a whole lot easier for me.
You can't see me?
Not until you start speaking.
Oh, okay. Now, what do you want me to do?
The next time you have a question, please ask staff.
Do I do what? What do I do? Click
Text
something?
them or chat. Oh, I'm sorry. They're telling me that they.
We can see her.
Okay, they can see you. It's just a surprise to me. Never mind.
Okay.
Councilmember Burke, did you have a question or a comment?
No question, but absolutely a comment. This is Ms. Woodson. Thank you so much. This is great detailed information. And I think that during the January, February time period that you inquired about, Chair McIntosh, we probably were still dealing with people not being vaccinated and not feeling comfortable riding. But I'm so thrilled that the ridership is up, and I'm also excited about the new buses that will be added to the fleet. So congratulations. I think you're doing an outstanding job. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
We've still got a fair amount of report to go. So let's, Mr. Larson, can you hold your question until we get a little bit further?
Absolutely. I'll hold it to the end.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so I'll go through these next slides quickly. Just a couple other safety enhancements that we did effective on yesterday. Just minor changes on Route 86. Basically, we just went. When they first did the change in Route 86 in 2017, the operators were going all the way around the loop right at the Timlick area, and we noticed when training and everything, some people were going the wrong way. So we just wanted to make it consistent, make sure all the drivers were traveling, and so that whole Skyline area would be operated by all of the drivers. So that was a minor change. Next slide, please. And on the 87, that's where we actually made a change, and this was because of the some issues with the turn that we were making on University. So we made a couple changes there, and which will provide still service to the Germantown, Haynes Mill area. KNW will still have access, so no loss. There's no loss in our access to that, any individuals in that area, just a minor tweak to the route for safety issues so that the bus will not make a U-turn on the street. Next slide, please. So 89 is the route that services the Industries for the Blind, and I'm sure that many of you know the history of the accidents that took place there. So we had to do something with that to avoid accidents and avoid a major collision. So we did this change effective yesterday, which just makes it goes up and makes a left turn and makes a right turn on North Point Boulevard, and you see it in the red, so I won't go through all of that. But that change was actually a benefit because it provides additional service to the Indiana area as well. So that was a good change. Next slide, please. So So these next few slides are just the common slides that we present on a with our update, just showing you the ridership, and you kind of got a grasp of that with the COVID impact as well. So as you can see, for the fluctuation, we're creeping back up, and with our ridership on the fixed route. Next slide, please. On-time performance steady around the 85-86 percentage, and like I said, with us identifying and correcting the stopping at the criteria, we do feel that we'll see an increase in the on-time performance as well. Next slide, please. TransAid, same scenario. We're doing really well with our recovering our lost ridership in the TransAid department. We are not where we used to be. We used to average about 1,000 trips a day, anywhere from 800 to 1,000 trips a day. Right now, we're back around 600 trips a day. Last week, we actually hit 600 for the first time since COVID for the week of TransAid. Next slide, please. And of course, the on-time performance, because of the ridership decrease, we're hovering in the 98th percentile. And so that means we're picking up our passengers on time, getting them where they need to be, in which they are very appreciative of that. But we're able to do that because of the variance in the ridership. And we still have the same amount of drivers. Next slide, please. My accident frequency, this is just the overview, and it gives the outline. We are still really doing well with our accidents, and we're really happy because over the past 3 years, we have trended in the right direction in the last couple of years. We had some challenges in that area, and we implemented several different action items to address safety issues, and we'll continue to do so. And we see the efforts in that with our accident frequency. Next slide, please. And this is a reward that the Winston-Salem transit drivers received during the North Carolina Public Transportation Conference in 2021. They identified, and we were the recipients of the Safety Award for traveling over 1 million miles with no preventable accidents. So I wanted to make sure I showed you all that. And during our Driver Appreciation Day, we wanted one of the slogan that my marketing director, Tina, came up with was, "Because you rock, we roll." So all of our drivers were able to receive a cup with that slogan on there with the little candy treat in there, just to say thank you. Little, but some way to show our appreciation with that and a meal. So we're real proud of that.
Nice touch.
Thank you. And that is my presentation for you all tonight. I appreciate you offering me this opportunity to present to you, and I'll entertain any questions or concerns that you may have.
Absolutely. Thank you on a very thorough report. Now, Councilmember Larson.
And Donna, you rock. That's just a matter of fact. And I guess you roll as well. I'm very impressed with the one word you said early in your presentation, and that was compliance. And I know that it takes a great deal of effort. You have a lot of federal money pouring in right now. You got a lot of budget responsibilities to manage that money, and I appreciate the effort that you're taking to make sure that we are all buttoned down, as it were, in our federal compliance with these programs. Particularly, I want to ask a little bit, first of all, and also thank you for the bus stops at Academy and Granville. I've had several comments about a need of some bus stops in that location. We got a lot of elderly in that Granville apartment complex. And it seems to me that as a council, we approved locations for some 60 bus stops a while back. Is that ring a bell with other council members? A number of locations. And different locations. And what I'm hearing also is some flexibility on your staff to add to those. And I'm wondering about the funding for those additional locations, if we're good with all of that, or if we have funding needs for additional stations that are outrunning our ability to meet them. The new bus stops that you're putting up are exceptionally nice. The trash cans and the benches and the nice plexiglass are stellar. I do wonder what the plan is for maintenance of the trash around these locations, if there's a program that we have for keeping them clean. I've noticed on a couple of them, we're seeing a lot of litter developing around some of them. And I don't know if we have a standardized program or who that falls under to keep an eye on policing up those trash cans and picking up the litter around them. maybe you could talk a little bit. But thank you so much for what you're doing. It's an outstanding job, truly an outstanding job all the way around.
Thank you so much. And yes, as far as the trash cans and the cleanup, I had a conversation with Johnny Taylor as recent as yesterday, and he and I have been speaking with Tanique. We've been talking about that. It's a collective effort as far as the trash can with the city department, and so Tobias Mack, myself, and Keith Finch, who we've met. So we have a plan in place to address the additional bus stops and shelters to make sure that someone is taking care of that. And we've requested some additional staff for Worcester to help to monitor that process, because we want them to continue and maintain their look and their appearance, make sure the trash cans are emptied. But it's a collective effort with the city and Worcester as far as maintenance on those.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, Ms. Woodson, I do want to comment. I've got some good feedback on the beautiful shelters. And though I do want to apologize for some of our residents who don't even respect those shelters, and the glass has been broken and damage has been given to them. And if we have money, I would love us to put some surveillance cameras up and identify those folks. And perhaps we can have a secret weapon in our shelters that every time they touch it wrong way, a stick or something comes and beats their butt. Because, I'm sorry, that was an ethical statement. But you know, when we do enhancements and beautification and our seniors love them, and then somebody has the audacity to come in and destroy them for no reason whatsoever, I'm sorry, I get angry and upset. Somebody's butt needs to be whipped. Right. But I do admire you for coming back and repair them. But I don't want people to get comfortable that they could go destroy stuff and we're going to replace it. But at the same time, people should not be denied the beauty that they do provide. And I've got so many beautiful comments about those shelters. And having been a bus rider and now being a senior, those are valuable amenities to our community and to our residents. So at some point, let's get very creative and figure out how we can take care of those little terrorists that think they're going to come in and tear up our bus shelters, because that's not acceptable behavior. So that's thank you so much for all you do too. Thank you. Thank you.
We have talked about, staff, we've talked about installing some cameras and, you know, the cost and the funding that's needed for that at our shelters, because we want to continue to make our shelters look good. And I do appreciate even the Arts Commission, they quickly replaced one of the shelters that was damaged with the artwork in there. And, you know, we knew that there was a possibility that would happen. It is unfortunate, but we have things in place to replace it because we want to continue that look as long as we possibly can.
Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo the sentiments that Ms. Woodson, great job, great presentation, and lots of improvements. I'd also like to echo Council Member Scipio's sentiments on people who vandalize. I kind of feel the same way. I don't know about that stick. I don't know how we're going to manage that, but I've got an idea that doesn't. I'm not asking anybody to respond. I just want to plant the seed. With bus drivers, we've got eyes and ears all over the city as we struggle with increased gun violence, as we struggle with how to maintain the peace in our city and increased police calls. Is there a way that we could connect our drivers with someone, whether that's the police force, whether it's someone within the transportation system that could relay a message? But my guess is that a lot of times bus drivers see things and you know, if you see something, say something, they may see trouble brewing before it actually comes to a head, and they might be able to alert police to potentially dangerous situations. So that's just food for thought. And I don't know who the right person would be to investigate that, but I'll throw that out for somebody to take ownership of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Woodson, I want to thank you for bringing an incredibly positive report after an incredibly difficult year.
Yes.
Your department has probably has, outside the police department, probably has the most contact with the public and probably faced the biggest challenges, of any of our departments. And to come back with increase in ridership, the safety award, great on-time performance, the creativity of coming up with vaccine rides, being able to balance new stops along with keeping the buses flowing. I mean, I'm just very impressed and very thankful. And I look forward to the next great report that you bring to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Council. I appreciate you.
Anything else from the committee or the council? Ms. Adams? No?
That was to leave the meeting, sir.
Okay. Not so fast. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for a great Public Works meeting. We'll see you again next month.
Thank you.
Sir.